The steam rose from the industrial sink, coating my raw hands in a film of moisture that never quite dried. My fingertips had long since wrinkled into soft ridges, my nails brittle from the harsh chemicals we used to sanitize the endless parade of plates, glasses, and silverware that cycled through the casino's kitchen. I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear with my forearm, careful not to touch my face with my soap-slick hands. "Martinez, we need more champagne flutes for the high rollers room," barked Jerome, the floor manager who never bothered to learn my first name. "ASAP." "Yes, sir," I replied, reaching for the special rack where we kept the crystal. "My name is Elise," I wanted to say. "I've worked here for 7 months." But the words stayed trapped in my throat, like so many things these days. Through the small window that connected the dishwashing station to the rest of the kitchen, I could see the chaos of the Saturday night rush. Chefs shouting orders, waitstaff hurrying with trays balanced precariously on their palms, bartenders shaking cocktails with practiced flourishes. Beyond them all, through the swinging doors that led to the casino floor, occasional flashes of light and bursts of sound escaped, slot machines chiming their false promises, dealers calling numbers, the collective murmur of hundreds of people chasing fortune. I was invisible here, hidden away in this steamy corner, arms submerged to my elbows in sudsy water, but that invisibility was a comfort. It kept me safe. It kept Jamie safe. My 6-year-old son would be asleep by now, curled up in his Batman pajamas, clutching the stuffed dinosaur his father had given him before disappearing from our lives 3 years ago. Mrs. Abernathy from apartment 4B was watching him. She charged less than most sitters, partly out of pity, I suspected, and partly because she was lonely. Whatever the reason, I was grateful. The night shift paid an extra $1.50 per hour, and with rent due in 5 days, I needed every cent. I checked my watch. A cheap digital thing with a cracked face and a fraying band. 4 more hours to go. My lower back ached from standing, and my left shoulder had developed a persistent twinge from the repetitive motion of scrubbing. But it was steady work. Legal work. Safe work. The kitchen doors swung open with more force than usual, and the noise level dropped abruptly. I glanced up, curious about the sudden change in atmosphere. A group of men in tailored suits had entered, looking out of place among the kitchen staff in their stained aprons and white uniforms. "Mr. Castellano would like to inspect the kitchen," announced a broad-shouldered man with a shaved head and a scar that ran from his left ear to the corner of his mouth. He didn't wait for permission, simply stepped aside to make way for someone behind him. The name registered vaguely in my mind. Castellano. I'd heard it whispered among the staff, always with a mixture of fear and reverence. He owned the casino, or at least that's what people said. No one seemed to know for certain, and the official paperwork listed some corporate entity as the proprietor. But everyone knew who really held the power at the Royal Flush. I kept my head down, focusing on my task. The rich and powerful didn't concern themselves with people like me. I was part of the machinery, as functional and unremarkable as the dishwashers I operated. I reached for another glass, plunging it into the soapy water. That's when I felt it. A peculiar sensation, like a physical weight against my skin. I looked up, through the glass partition that separated the dishwashing station from the rest of the kitchen, and found myself caught in the gaze of a man I had never seen before. He stood perfectly still amid the bustling kitchen, his presence commanding a bubble of space around him that no one dared to enter. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore a charcoal gray suit that looked as though it had been painted onto his frame. His hair was dark, almost black, swept back from a face that was all sharp angles and shadows, but it was his eyes that held me, pale blue, startling in their intensity, and fixed directly on me. A plate slipped from my fingers, shattering in the sink with a crash that seemed to echo in the sudden silence of my mind. The sound broke whatever strange spell had fallen over me. I hurriedly began gathering the broken pieces, mortified by my clumsiness and irrationally fearful of drawing attention. "You're bleeding," said a voice, deep and quiet, much closer than I expected. I looked up, startled to find him standing on the other side of my workstation. I hadn't heard him approach. The other men in suits had formed a loose semicircle a few paces behind him, their expressions impassive, their eyes constantly scanning the room. I glanced down at my hand and saw a thin line of red welling up from my palm, where a shard of porcelain had sliced the skin. "It's nothing," I murmured, reaching for a clean towel. He didn't respond, but his eyes hadn't left my face. They moved now, taking in the damp wisps of hair that had escaped my ponytail, the tired shadows beneath my eyes, the faded uniform that hung loose on my frame. I fought the urge to shrink away from his scrutiny, to hide my chapped hands and the cheap watch that proclaimed my poverty as clearly as a neon sign. "Your name?" he asked, the question so quiet it might have been meant only for me, despite the audience of kitchen staff pretending not to watch our exchange. "Elise," I answered, surprised into honesty by the directness of his gaze. "Elise Martinez." Something flickered across his face. Recognition, perhaps, or interest, but it was gone before I could identify it. He extended his hand, not in greeting but palm up, an unmistakable command. "Let me see." I hesitated, aware of the eyes on us, of the power imbalance that yawned between us like a chasm, but there was something in his manner that made refusal seem impossible. Slowly, I placed my injured hand in his. His fingers were warm and dry against my damp skin, his touch surprisingly gentle as he examined the cut. "This needs attention," he stated. Not a suggestion, but a fact. "I have a first aid kit," offered Jerome, materializing at the man's elbow, eager to be of service. "We can take care of it right away, Mr. Castellano." So this was Castellano. The name fit him somehow, elegant and hard, with an edge of danger. He didn't acknowledge Jerome's offer, his eyes still fixed on my face with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. "Have it brought to my office," he said, and it took me a moment to realize he was speaking to one of the men behind him, not to me or Jerome. "Along with Ms. Martinez." Panic flared in my chest. "I can't," I blurted out. "My shift isn't over and "Your shift is over," he interrupted, his tone gentle but brooking no argument. He turned to Jerome. "Ms. Martinez will be taking the rest of the night off, with pay." Jerome nodded rapidly. "Of course, Mr. Castellano, whatever you say." I wanted to protest further, to explain that I couldn't afford to miss even an hour of work, that I had a child waiting at home, that I didn't want to be singled out in any way. But the words died in my throat as Castellano's gaze returned to mine. "It wasn't a request," he said softly, and something in his eyes made me believe that refusing him would be more dangerous than following. One of his men approached, gesturing for me to follow him. Castellano released my hand, which I hadn't realized he was still holding. "I'll join you shortly," he said, and then turned away, continuing his inspection of the kitchen as though nothing unusual had occurred. I was led through a maze of hallways I'd never seen before, despite working at the casino for months. We passed through a door marked private and entered a different world, one of plush carpeting, subdued lighting, and hushed voices. The walls were paneled in dark wood, adorned with paintings that looked expensive even to my untrained eye. The man escorting me, who hadn't spoken a single word since we left the kitchen, stopped before a heavy oak door and knocked once before opening it and gesturing for me to enter. "Wait here," he instructed, finally breaking his silence. "Someone will attend to your hand until Mr. Castellano arrives." The door closed behind me with a soft click that nonetheless sounded like the tumbling of a lock. I stood alone in what was clearly an office, but unlike any I had ever seen. It was spacious and elegant, dominated by a massive desk of polished wood. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city lights spread out below like scattered gems on black velvet. A movement to my right startled me. A middle-aged woman in a crisp uniform approached with a small medical kit. "Let me see that cut, dear," she said kindly, gesturing to a leather sofa positioned near a fireplace, where flames danced merrily, casting the room in a warm glow. I sat, allowing her to clean and bandage my hand, my mind racing. Why had Castellano singled me out? What could he possibly want from someone like me? The questions tumbled through my thoughts, each more alarming than the last. "There you are," said the woman, securing the bandage with a gentle pat. "It's not deep. Should heal nicely." "Thank you," I replied automatically, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "Do you know why I'm here?" She gave me a look that mingled sympathy with caution. "It's not my place to speculate on Mr. Castellano's business." She gathered the first aid supplies and moved toward the door. "Can I bring you anything while you wait? Water? Coffee?" I shook my head, and she slipped out. leaving me alone with my mounting anxiety. Minutes ticked by, marked by an ornate clock on the mantelpiece that looked like it cost more than 6 months of my rent. I perched on the edge of the sofa, afraid to sink into its luxurious comfort, feeling as out of place as a crow among peacocks. The door opened, and Castellano entered, now without his entourage. He'd removed his suit jacket, and the crisp white shirt he wore beneath it emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and the lean strength of his frame. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, secure in his domain and his power. "Ms. Martinez," he said, crossing to a cabinet near the windows. "Would you care for a drink?" "No, thank you," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Mr. Castellano, I don't understand why I'm here." He poured himself what looked like whiskey into a crystal tumbler, his back to me. "Dominic," he said, "I'm sorry." He turned, those pale blue eyes finding mine again across the room. "My name is Dominic. I prefer it to Mr. Castellano in private conversation." Private conversation. The phrase sent a shiver of unease down my spine. What could someone like him possibly have to discuss privately with someone like me? "You've been working at my establishment for 7 months, he continued, moving to lean against the edge of his desk, studying me with that same unnerving intensity. Always the late shift, always alone, always watching the doors. My heart stuttered in my chest. He'd been keeping track of me? "How do you—" "I make it my business to know what happens in my casino," he interrupted smoothly. "Every employee, every customer, every transaction. Nothing occurs here without my knowledge." I swallowed hard, fighting the urge to flee. "I still don't understand why I'm here." A smile curved his lips, subtle and somehow dangerous. "Because I've been watching you, Elise Martinez, and I find myself curious." The way he said my name, rolling it off his tongue like he was tasting it, sent another tremor through me, not entirely of fear this time, which was perhaps more frightening still. "About what?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He took a sip of his whiskey, considering me over the rim of the glass. "About why a woman with your obvious intelligence and education is washing dishes in my kitchen. About why you flinch at loud noises and watch the doors. About who or what you're running from." The accuracy of his observations felt like a physical blow. I stood up, suddenly unable to remain seated under his scrutiny. "I'm not running from anything. I'm just trying to make a living, like everyone else." "Like everyone else," he repeated softly. "Is that why you use a different name on your employment forms than on your apartment lease? Why you walk a different route home each night? Why you've enrolled your son in a school across town rather than the one in your district?" Ice flooded my veins. Jamie. He knew about Jamie. "How dare you?" I whispered, anger temporarily overwhelming fear. "You've been spying on me? On my son?" Something shifted in his expression. Approval, perhaps, at my flash of defiance. "I told you, Elise. Nothing happens in my world without my knowledge." He set down his glass and straightened, taking a step toward me. "Especially when it concerns someone who interests me." I backed away, bumping into the sofa behind me. "I'm nobody. Just a dishwasher. There's nothing interesting about me." "I disagree," he said, continuing his approach until he stood directly before me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle, with notes of sandalwood and spice. "I find you very interesting indeed. A woman with secrets, living in fear, working herself to exhaustion to protect her child." A lump formed in my throat. "Please," I said, unsure what I was even asking for. "I just want to go home. My son is safe with Mrs. Abernathy," he finished for me. "She's a former school teacher, divorced, no children of her own. She drinks too much sherry on weekends but is otherwise reliable. Your son is sleeping soundly. He won't miss you for another hour." The depth of his knowledge terrified me. I stared up at him, trembling now. "What do you want from me?" His expression softened fractionally. "For now, just conversation." He gestured to the sofa. "Please sit. I promise you have nothing to fear from me tonight." Tonight. The qualifier wasn't lost on me. Reluctantly, I sank back onto the sofa, and he took a seat in an armchair opposite me, maintaining a distance that should have been reassuring, but somehow wasn't. "You're in trouble," he stated, not a question but a certainty. "Financial, certainly, that much is obvious. But there's more. Someone dangerous. Someone you're hiding from." I remained silent, unwilling to confirm or deny his suspicions. My past was my own, my burden to carry. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded as if I had spoken. "I respect your caution, but know this. I can help you, Elise. Whatever your problem, whoever you're running from, I have resources, power, protection." "Why would you help me?" I asked, genuinely baffled. "You don't know me." A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his features from merely handsome to devastatingly beautiful. "Let's just say I've developed a personal interest." His words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. A personal interest. I'd heard variations of that phrase before, from men who saw my vulnerability as an opportunity. But something about Dominic Castellano's expression, the calm certainty in his eyes, told me this was different. More dangerous, perhaps. "Mr. Castellano—" "Dominic," he corrected gently. "Dominic," I conceded, the name feeling strangely intimate on my tongue. "I appreciate your concern, but you don't know anything about my situation." "Michael Reeves," he said, the name falling like a stone into still water. "Former boyfriend. Jamie's father. 3 years ago, he stole money from his employer, a pharmaceutical distribution company that serves as a front for the Vasquez cartel, and disappeared. They believe you know where he is, where the money is." The blood drained from my face. I gripped the edge of the sofa, suddenly lightheaded. How could he possibly know? I'd never told anyone the truth. Not even Mrs. Abernathy or my few acquaintances at work. I'd constructed an entirely different story. That Michael had simply abandoned us. A sadly common tale that raised few questions. "I don't," I whispered. The denial automatic after so many years. "I don't know anything." Dominic leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, those pale blue eyes boring into mine. "The men who came looking for you in Seattle weren't convinced, nor were the ones in Portland 3 months later. That's why you moved again, why you're here now, working under your mother's maiden name, living in a building without security cameras, paying cash whenever possible." My throat constricted. The walls seemed to close in around me, the luxurious office suddenly as confining as a cell. "How do you know all this?" A slight shrug lifted his shoulders. "As I said, I have resources." He rose and moved to the windows, looking out over the glittering city. "The Vasquez organization has been trying to expand into my territory for the past year. They're careless, brutal. They lack finesse." I said nothing, trying to process the implications of his words. Territory. His territory. The rumors about Dominic Castellano suddenly crystallized into certainty. "You're not just a businessman," I said quietly. He turned, a faint smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I'm many things, Elise. A businessman is certainly one of them." "You're like them," I continued, the truth dawning with terrifying clarity. "The people Michael stole from, you're the same." Something hardened in his expression. "I am nothing like them," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous softness. "The Vasquez cartel butchers innocents to send messages. They traffic children. They poison communities with impure products cut with lethal chemicals." He shook his head once, decisive. "No, we are not the same." The distinction seemed academic to me. One criminal organization versus another. Different methods, perhaps, but the same fundamental disregard for law and morality. "I should go," I said, rising on unsteady legs. "Thank you for attending to my hand, and for the information. But I need to get home to my son." He made no move to stop me, watching with that unsettling intensity as I edged toward the door. "The Vasquez cartel has traced you to Las Vegas," he said quietly. "They have people at the airport, the bus station. They're methodically searching every hotel, restaurant, and casino in the city." I froze, my hand on the doorknob. "How do you know that?" "I told you. I have resources." He moved closer, his steps silent on the plush carpet. "It's only a matter of time before they find you, Elise. Days, at most." Terror clawed at my chest, making it difficult to breathe. After 3 years of running, of constantly looking over my shoulder, of waking in the night drenched in sweat from nightmares where Jamie was taken from me, to hear that they were close again was almost more than I could bear. "I'll leave tonight," I said, mind already racing through the meager options available to me. I had a small emergency fund hidden in my apartment, barely enough for bus tickets and a few days' expenses. We could go to Reno, or maybe Salt Lake City. Start over again. Another name, another dingy apartment, another job where I was invisible. "Running won't save you this time," Dominic said, now standing close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "They're better organized than before, more desperate. The man Michael stole from has lost standing within the organization. He needs to recover the money, or make an example of those he believes helped hide it." I looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. "Why are you telling me this? What do you want?" His expression remained unreadable. "I told you. I can help you." "Why would you?" I pressed, suspicion overriding fear. "What's in it for you?" A flicker of something. Approval, perhaps, crossed his features. "Smart girl," he murmured. "Nothing in this world comes without a price, does it?" He reached out, slowly enough that I could have moved away if I chose, and brushed a strand of damp hair from my face. "Let's just say I have my reasons." His touch, brief as it was, sent an electric current through my skin. I stepped back, unsettled by my body's betrayal. "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting tonight." He moved past me to open the door, revealing the same silent, suited man who had escorted me earlier. "Anthony will take you home. There will be someone watching your apartment tonight. For protection." "I don't want your protection," I said, even as part of me recognized the futility of refusing. Dominic's smile was cold and certain. "What you want and what you need are rarely the same thing, Elise. A lesson I learned long ago." He nodded to Anthony. "See Ms. Martinez safely home. Make sure she's not followed." I hesitated at the threshold, caught between fear of Dominic Castellano and the greater fear of what awaited me outside the shelter of his influence. "What happens tomorrow?" I asked. His gaze softened fractionally. "Tomorrow, we find a more permanent solution to your problem." He took my bandaged hand in his, turning it palm up to examine the dressing. "The cut should heal cleanly. Make sure to keep it dry." The sudden shift to mundane concern was jarring. I withdrew my hand from his grasp. "Thank you," I said stiffly, unable to shake the feeling that I had somehow entered into a bargain whose terms I didn't fully understand. Anthony led me through the labyrinthine back corridors of the casino to a service exit where a sleek black SUV with tinted windows waited, its engine running. The vehicle screamed money and power, exactly the kind of conspicuous transportation I had spent years avoiding. "Is this necessary?" I asked, as he opened the rear door for me. "I usually take the bus." "Mr. Castellano's instructions were clear," Anthony replied, his first complete sentence to me. His voice was surprisingly gentle for a man whose very presence exuded danger. The interior of the SUV was luxurious. Soft leather seats, the subtle scent of new car and expensive cologne, temperature perfectly regulated against the desert night's chill. The driver, another suited man whose broad shoulders strained the fabric of his jacket, didn't acknowledge me beyond a brief nod in the rearview mirror before pulling smoothly away from the curb. As we drove through the neon-lit streets of Las Vegas, I stared out the window, mind reeling. In the space of a single hour, my carefully constructed world had been upended. The danger I'd been running from for 3 years had found me again. But now there was a new complication. Dominic Castellano, with his penetrating eyes and unsettling knowledge of my life. Out of the frying pan, into the fire. The old idiom seemed particularly apt. We pulled up outside my apartment building, a shabby 3-story structure with peeling paint and security doors that had long since stopped locking properly. The contrast between the gleaming SUV and my humble residence couldn't have been more stark. "Wait," Anthony said, as I reached for the door handle. He scanned the street, eyes narrowed, before nodding to the driver. Only then did he exit the vehicle and open my door, standing like a shield between me and the quiet street. "This isn't necessary," I murmured, embarrassed by the attention we might attract. The last thing I needed was more curious neighbors. Anthony didn't respond, simply escorted me to the building's entrance, and waited while I fumbled with my keys. Only when I had the door open did he speak. "There will be someone outside all night," he said. "Don't be alarmed if you notice a car or two. They're with us." He handed me a small card with a single number printed on it. "If you need anything at all, call this number. It's a direct line. Someone will answer, regardless of the hour." I took the card reflexively, slipping it into my pocket. "Thank you," I said, unsure what else to offer. Anthony nodded once and returned to the SUV, leaving me to enter the building alone. I climbed the 2 flights of stairs to my apartment, each step heavier than the last as exhaustion and anxiety warred within me. "Mrs. Abernathy" answered my soft knock immediately, her kind face creased with concern. "You're home early, dear," she said, ushering me inside. "Is everything all right? You look pale." "I'm fine," I lied, summoning a smile that felt brittle even to me, "just not feeling well. They let me off early." She didn't look convinced but was too polite to press. "Jamie's been sleeping soundly, not a peep." She gathered her cardigan and purse. "Should I come by tomorrow as usual?" Tomorrow. What would tomorrow bring? Dominic had promised a permanent solution to my problems, whatever that might entail, but for now I needed normalcy, at least for Jamie's sake. "Yes, please," I said, same time. After seeing Mrs. Abernathy out, I locked the door and slid the chain into place, a flimsy barrier that would do little against anyone truly determined to enter, but provided the illusion of security. I checked the windows next, ensuring they were secure, before finally allowing myself to sink onto the worn sofa. The events of the evening played through my mind like a fever dream. Dominic Castellano, the revelation that he knew my secrets. The Vasquez cartel closing in. It was too much to process, too overwhelming to face. I pushed myself up and moved quietly to Jamie's room, needing the comfort of seeing him safe and peaceful. He slept as Mrs. Abernathy had said, one arm flung above his head, the other clutching his dinosaur. His dark lashes cast shadows on his cheeks, and his breathing came in soft, even puffs. My beautiful boy, the only good thing to come from my relationship with Michael. The only thing that mattered. I knelt beside his bed, gently brushing his hair, so like his father's, from his forehead. "I'll keep you safe," I whispered. "Whatever it takes." The words hung in the still air of the bedroom, a vow and a premonition. Whatever it takes, even if it meant accepting help from a man like Dominic Castellano. Even if the price of that help was something I couldn't afford to pay? I had no answers, only the bone-deep certainty that I would do anything, to protect my son. Exhausted beyond measure, I showered quickly, washing away the scent of industrial detergent and, absurdly, trying to erase the lingering sensation of Dominic's touch on my skin. As I changed into an oversized t-shirt and cotton shorts that served as pajamas, I caught sight of my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Pale face, shadows beneath my eyes, damp hair curling around my shoulders. I looked frightened, vulnerable. Exactly the kind of woman who would attract a predator like Dominic Castellano. Because that's what he was, beneath the expensive suit and cultured manner. A predator. A man who saw something he wanted and took it, regardless of laws or morality. The only question was, what did he want from me? I turned away from my reflection and its unanswerable questions. Sleep. I needed sleep. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own decisions. For tonight, at least, Jamie and I were safe. As I slipped beneath the thin blankets of my bed, I found myself listening for sounds outside my window. Cars passing, voices, anything that might signal danger. Instead, there was only the usual ambient noise of the city at night, and beneath that, an unusual silence where my anxiety should have been. The knowledge that someone was watching over us, even if that someone answered to Dominic Castellano, provided a strange comfort I hadn't felt in years. Just before sleep claimed me, my thoughts drifted to pale blue eyes and the touch of warm fingers against my skin. Dangerous thoughts, foolish thoughts. But in the darkness of my bedroom, with danger pressing in from all sides, I allowed myself the momentary weakness of remembering how it felt to be seen. Truly seen. for the first time in years. Morning came too soon, sunlight filtering through the thin curtains and painting stripes across my bed. For a blissful moment, I existed in the space between sleep and wakefulness, free from fear and memory. Then reality crashed back. Dominic Castellano, the Vasquez cartel, danger closing in from all sides. I sat up, pushing tangled hair from my face. The digital clock on my nightstand read 7:15. Jamie would be awake soon, hungry and full of 6-year-old energy. School day routine. Normal life. The juxtaposition of mundane morning rituals against the shadow of what had happened last night seemed absurd, almost laughable. The sound of movement in the kitchen jolted me fully awake. I froze, heart hammering against my ribs. Jamie was too short to reach the cupboards, and he knew better than to use the stove unsupervised. Someone was in our apartment. I slipped from bed, scanning the room for a weapon. The baseball bat I kept under the bed, a concession to living in a neighborhood where police response times averaged 20 minutes, felt reassuring in my grip as I crept toward the bedroom door. "Good morning, Ms. Martinez," called a female voice, unfamiliar but calm. "Please don't be alarmed. Mr. Castellano sent me." I hesitated, bat still raised. "Who are you? How did you get in?" "My name is Nina. I'm here to help with your son while you and Mr. Castellano handle your situation." As for how I got in, there was a pause, and I could almost hear the shrug in her voice. Locks aren't really an obstacle in my line of work. I lowered the bat slightly and peered around the doorframe. A woman stood in my kitchen, arranging what appeared to be fresh pastries on a plate. She was tall and athletically built, with dark hair pulled into a severe ponytail. Despite her casual clothing, jeans and a simple blouse, there was nothing casual about her watchful posture or the alert eyes that assessed me from across the room. "Mr. Castellano had no right to send anyone into my home," I said, clinging to indignation because it was preferable to fear. "Especially not around my son." Nina's expression remained neutral. "Your security concerns outweigh conventional etiquette, Mr. Castellano has information suggesting the Vasquez people have narrowed their search. This building is being watched, not just by us." She gestured to the plate of pastries. "I brought breakfast. There's coffee too. Mr. Castellano will be here at 9 to discuss your options." The matter-of-fact way she delivered this information, as though armed criminals watching my apartment and Mafia bosses scheduling morning meetings were perfectly normal, left me momentarily speechless. "Mommy?" Jamie's sleepy voice came from behind me. I turned to find him rubbing his eyes, dinosaur clutched to his chest. "I'm hungry," I forced a smile, quickly setting the bat aside. "Good morning, sunshine. I was just about to make breakfast." I threw a warning glance at Nina, silently pleading for discretion. She seemed to understand, her severe expression softening as she looked at Jamie. "You must be the famous Jamie," she said, her voice gentler than I would have expected. "I heard you like dinosaurs. That's a nice one you have there." Jamie regarded her suspiciously, edging closer to me. "Who are you?" "This is Nina," I explained, placing a protective hand on his shoulder. "She's a friend who stopped by for breakfast, with donuts," Nina added, lifting the plate slightly. "And chocolate milk if your mom says it's okay." Jamie's eyes widened, his natural caution warring with 6-year-old desire for forbidden treats. "Can I have chocolate milk, Mom, please?" The normalcy of the question, the ordinary mothering decision in the midst of extraordinary circumstances, nearly undid me. I swallowed hard against the lump in my throat. "Just this once," I agreed. "Why don't you go wash up first?" Once Jamie had scampered off to the bathroom, I turned back to Nina. "I don't know what Dominic told you, but I don't need a babysitter, for me or my son." Nina met my gaze evenly. "2 men have been watching this building since 4 a.m. They match the description of known Vasquez associates. A third joined them about an hour ago. So no, Ms. Martinez, you don't need a babysitter. You need protection." She poured coffee into a chipped mug and held it out to me. "Cream? Sugar?" I took the mug mechanically, my hands suddenly unsteady. "Black is fine," I murmured, trying to process this new information. They had found me already. They were outside, watching, waiting. "Mr. Castellano has a plan," Nina continued, her voice low as Jamie's footsteps pattered back toward us. "But you need to be ready to move quickly. Pack only essentials. 1 small bag each. Move? I echoed. Move where? Nina's eyes flicked to Jamie as he re-entered the room, and she smoothly transitioned to a smile. Those are some awesome pajamas, she told him, setting a glass of chocolate milk on the table. Batman is my favorite too. While Jamie happily dug into a chocolate-filled pastry, heedless of the tension simmering in the room, Nina handed me a small envelope. Inside was a note written in elegant, masculine script. Be ready at 9. Bring only what you can carry. Everything else can be replaced. Everything except you and the boy, D. I folded the note and slipped it into my pocket, mind racing. Leave? Today, with Dominic Castellano? The idea seemed ludicrous, dangerous in ways I couldn't even fully articulate. And yet, what choice did I have? The Vasquez cartel had found me, again. And this time, they were closer than ever. I need to get Jamie ready for school, I said, more to myself than to Nina. She shook her head once, decisive. No school today. It's not safe. Jamie looked up, face smeared with chocolate. No school? His expression brightened with the universal joy of unexpected freedom. Can we go to the park instead? Not today, buddy, I said, forcing a light tone. We're going on a little trip, like a vacation? He asked, excitement building. I nodded, not trusting my voice for more. A vacation, or an escape, or possibly walking straight from one danger into another. The next hour passed in a blur of activity. I helped Jamie dress, and then packed his favorite toys, a few changes of clothes, and his beloved dinosaur into his Batman backpack. My own packing was equally sparse. Practical clothing, toiletries, the emergency cash from its hiding place behind the loose baseboard in my closet. The envelope contained just over $2,000, all that remained of my last 3 paychecks, saved penny by penny for exactly this kind of emergency. Not enough to start over again, not really. Not with the Vasquez cartel so close. At precisely 8:45, Nina's phone chimed with a message. She checked it and nodded to me. Time to go, she said, all business now. Stay close to me. Don't stop for anything. Where are we? I began. But she cut me off with a sharp gesture. No questions. Not now. She crouched to Jamie's level, her expression serious but kind. Jamie, we're going to play a game, okay? It's called Secret Agents. We need to be very quiet and do exactly as I say. Can you do that? Jamie nodded solemnly, thrilled to be included in adult matters. I can be quiet, he whispered, already playing his part. Nina led us not to the front door, but to the fire escape outside my bedroom window, this way, she said, sliding the window open with practiced ease, quickly now. I hesitated, struck by the finality of the moment. 3 years in this tiny apartment, it wasn't much. The pipes groaned, the heating was unreliable, and the neighbors sometimes fought loudly at 3 a.m, but it had been our refuge, our home. Ms. Martinez, Nina prompted, her tone gentle but urgent. We need to go. I nodded, helping Jamie through the window first, then following with our 2 small bags. The metal of the fire escape was already warm in the morning sun as we descended, moving as quietly as possible. At the bottom, instead of dropping to the alley below, Nina guided us through a service door into the adjacent building. We navigated a maze of corridors, emerging finally into what appeared to be an underground parking garage. A black SUV identical to the one from last night idled near the exit, engine running. The rear door opened as we approached, and I found myself looking into those now familiar pale blue eyes. Dominic Castellano sat in the back seat, impeccably dressed in another bespoke suit, this one navy blue. He extended a hand to Jamie. You must be the dinosaur expert I've heard about, he said, his deep voice warm with genuine interest. I'm Dominic. Your mother and I are friends. Jamie glanced at me, seeking permission. At my nod, he took Dominic's hand with surprising confidence. I'm Jamie. I know all about the Jurassic period. That's when the biggest dinosaurs lived. Is that so? Dominic replied, helping him into the vehicle. Perhaps you can teach me about them during our trip. I climbed in after Jamie, hyper-aware of Dominic's proximity as I settled onto the leather seat. Nina closed the door behind us and moved to the front passenger seat, exchanging quiet words with the driver. Anthony, I realized, recognizing his broad shoulders and closely cropped hair. "The men watching your apartment?" Dominic asked Nina. "Dealt with," she replied cryptically. "They won't be reporting back anytime soon." I glanced sharply at her, then at Dominic. "What does that mean? Did you—" I stopped, aware of Jamie's curious ears beside me. Dominic's expression revealed nothing. "It means we have some time before the Vasquez organization realizes they've lost track of you. Again." He turned his attention to Jamie, who was watching the exchange with undisguised interest. "I hear you like Batman. I always preferred Superman myself." Just like that, he redirected the conversation, engaging Jamie in an animated debate about superheroes that lasted as we pulled smoothly away from the curb and merged into morning traffic. I watched my son, normally shy with strangers, chatting comfortably with one of the most dangerous men in Las Vegas, and felt reality slipping further away with each passing minute. "Where are we going?" I asked, when there was a lull in their conversation. Dominic glanced at me, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "Somewhere safe. A property of mine outside the city. For how long?" "As long as necessary." The vagueness of his answer heightened my anxiety. "I have work tonight. I can't just disappear." A faint smile curved his lips. "Your employment at the casino has been terminated. With a generous severance package, of course." "You can't just—" I began, then stopped, recognizing the futility of the protest. Of course he could. He owned the casino. He apparently owned much more than that. "Your financial concerns are being addressed, Elise," he said quietly, his tone suggesting the matter was closed. "For now, focus on keeping yourself and Jamie safe." The use of my son's name sent a chill through me. The casual familiarity, the easy way he had insinuated himself into our lives in the span of less than 12 hours. It was calculated, I was certain. Everything about Dominic Castellano was calculated. The city gave way to desert landscape, endless stretches of sand and scrub, punctuated by distant mountains. Jamie pressed his face to the window, entranced by the passing scenery, while I tried to quell the growing sense of having surrendered control of my life entirely. After about 40 minutes of driving, we turned onto a private road that wound through increasing vegetation. Palm trees appeared, then flowering bushes, creating the illusion of an oasis rising from the barren landscape. Finally, we passed through an ornate gate with armed guards and up a curved driveway to a sprawling estate set against the backdrop of a natural rock formation. "Wow," Jamie breathed, eyes wide. "Is this a castle?" Dominic chuckled, the sound surprisingly warm. "Not quite. Just a house." Just a house. The understatement was almost comical. The structure before us was a masterpiece of modern architecture. Glass and stone merging seamlessly with the natural landscape, multiple levels cascading down the hillside. A glimpse of blue suggesting a pool somewhere beyond. As the SUV came to a stop in the circular drive, a staff member appeared to open the door. Dominic exited first, then turned to help Jamie down. I followed, legs stiff from tension more than the drive. "Welcome to Las Sombras," Dominic said, his hand coming to rest lightly at the small of my back as he guided us toward the entrance. The touch was proprietary, intimate in a way that should have offended me, but instead sent a confusing shiver up my spine. The interior of the house was as impressive as its exterior. Soaring ceilings, museum-quality art, furnishings that managed to be both luxurious and comfortable. A wall of windows offered a panoramic view of the desert valley below. The city a distant shimmer on the horizon. "Maria will show you to your rooms," Dominic said, gesturing to a middle-aged woman with a kind face who had appeared silently at his side. "I've taken the liberty of having some appropriate clothing and necessities provided, but if there's anything specific you need, please don't hesitate to ask." "Can I have a dinosaur book?" Jamie piped up, apparently deciding that this strange man who lived in a palace might be able to grant wishes. Dominic smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his severe features. "I believe that can be arranged. In fact, I may have something even better." He looked to Maria. Please show Jamie the library after he's settled. I think he'll find the natural history collection particularly interesting. As Maria led an excited Jamie toward what appeared to be the east wing of the house, Dominic turned his attention fully to me. The warmth he had shown my son vanished, replaced by that penetrating intensity that made me feel stripped bare. "We need to talk," he said simply. "My study. 1 hour." He glanced at his watch, a subtle dismissal. "I'll leave you to get settled." Before I could respond, he turned and strode away, leaving me alone in the vast entryway, a prisoner in a gilded cage I hadn't agreed to enter. I followed Maria through corridors adorned with artwork that probably cost more than I'd earn in several lifetimes. The house was a study in tasteful opulence. Nothing gaudy or ostentatious, yet every detail spoke of wealth and power. The kind of place that made you acutely aware of your own shabby clothes and calloused hands. "Here we are," Maria said, stopping before a door of rich, dark wood. "Mr. Castellano thought you might prefer to be near your son." She opened the door to reveal a suite that was larger than my entire apartment. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a sitting area with elegant furniture arranged around a fireplace. Beyond that, I glimpsed a bedroom with a king-sized bed draped in crisp white linens. The entire space was decorated in soothing shades of cream and pale blue, the latter an unsettling echo of Dominic's eyes. "Your son's room connects through here," Maria continued, moving to a door on the right. She opened it to show a smaller bedroom, already set up with toys and books that would delight any child. Jamie was bouncing on the bed, his earlier wariness completely forgotten. "Mom, look at these dinosaurs!" he exclaimed, pointing to a collection of detailed models arranged on a shelf. "And there are books, and a TV." His joy was infectious, momentarily cutting through my anxiety. At least he wasn't frightened. To him, this was just an exciting adventure, a vacation in a fancy house with new toys. The innocence of his perspective made my chest ache. "It's wonderful, sweetheart," I managed, forcing a smile. "But remember what we said about jumping on beds that aren't ours?" He stopped immediately, looking sheepish. "Sorry." Maria smiled kindly. "It's quite all right. The bed is sturdy." She turned to me. "The bathroom is through there," she said, pointing to another door. "Fresh clothes are in the closets. Mr. Castellano instructed me to tell you that everything here is for your use. If you need anything at all, just pick up the house phone and dial 0. She moved toward the exit, then paused. "Lunch will be served in the family dining room at noon, but I can bring something here if you prefer." Her eyes held a hint of sympathy, as though she understood my discomfort. "Thank you," I said, "but I think we'll come down. Jamie would probably enjoy exploring." After Maria left, I sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted despite the early hour. The events of the past 12 hours felt surreal, like a dream I couldn't quite wake from. 24 hours ago, I had been washing dishes in the casino kitchen, invisible and safe in my anonymity. Now I was in the home of a man who was, by his own admission, a criminal. A man who had orchestrated my rescue with military precision, who had inserted himself into my life with calculated determination. A man who wanted something from me, though what that might be remained unclear. I glanced at my watch. 45 minutes until my meeting with Dominic. Time to freshen up and gather my thoughts. I needed clarity, needed to understand exactly what I'd gotten myself and Jamie into. The bathroom was a marvel of marble and glass, with a shower large enough for 4 people and a soaking tub positioned to take advantage of the desert view. The vanity held an array of expensive toiletries, all new, all clearly purchased with a woman in mind. The level of preparation was both impressive and disturbing. How long had Dominic been planning this? How long had he been watching me? I showered quickly, the hot water washing away the lingering scent of industrial detergent from the night before. Wrapped in a plush robe I found hanging on the door, I ventured into the walk-in closet and stopped short. Rows of clothing hung neatly, all in my size, casual wear, dresses, even nightwear. Shoes lined the bottom shelves, again in my exact size, the intimacy of it. The knowledge that Dominic had learned such personal details about me sent a chill down my spine. I selected a simple sundress and sandals, avoiding the more revealing options. As I dressed, I caught sight of my reflection in the full-length mirror. The woman looking back at me was a stranger. Clean, well-dressed, standing in luxurious surroundings. But her eyes held the same fear, the same wariness that had been my constant companion for 3 years. After checking on Jamie, who was contentedly arranging dinosaur figures on the floor of his room under Maria's watchful eye, I made my way back through the house. I had been so distracted earlier that I hadn't paid attention to the route, but something, instinct, perhaps, or simply the pull of inevitability, led me to a heavy door that I somehow knew belonged to Dominic's study. I knocked once, a surprisingly assertive sound in the quiet hallway. "Enter," came his voice, that deep timbre that seemed to resonate in my bones. Dominic sat behind a massive desk, focused on something on the computer screen before him. He looked up as I entered, and something flickered in his expression, appreciation perhaps, or satisfaction at seeing me in clothes he had chosen. He rose in a fluid movement, buttoning his suit jacket in a gesture that spoke of ingrained manners. "Elise," he said, my name soft on his tongue. "Please, sit." He gestured to a seating area near the windows, where a tea service had been arranged on a low table. I took a seat on one of the leather armchairs, perching on the edge rather than allowing myself to sink into its comfort. "I want to know what's happening," I said, determined to maintain whatever small control I could. "All of it. Why you brought us here. What you want from me. How you know so much about the Vasquez cartel and Michael." Dominic poured tea into delicate china cups, his movements precise. "Direct questions. I appreciate that." He handed me a cup, his fingers brushing mine briefly. "Sugar?" I shook my head, impatient with the social niceties. He settled into the chair opposite mine, regarding me over the rim of his cup. "The simplest answer is that I'm protecting an investment." "An investment," I repeated flatly. "Is that what I am to you?" A faint smile touched his lips. "Not you specifically, no. Las Vegas. My territory. My businesses." He set his cup down. "The Vasquez cartel has been trying to establish a foothold here for the past year. I've been discouraging their efforts." His tone made it clear that this discouragement had not been gentle. "What does that have to do with me and my son?" "Their pursuit of you has brought key players into my territory, men I've been wanting to identify." He leaned forward slightly. "You're the bait in a trap, Elise. A trap I've been carefully setting for months." The blunt admission sent ice through my veins. "You've been using me," I whispered. "Using my fear, my son's safety. I've been protecting you," he corrected, his tone hardening. "If I wanted to simply use you as bait, I could have left you in that apartment and waited for them to find you, then eliminated them when they did." His eyes held mine. "Instead, I brought you here. Safe. Protected. For now," I said. "But what happens after your trap is sprung? What happens to Jamie and me then?" Dominic was silent for a moment, studying me with that unsettling intensity. "That depends," he finally said, "on what you choose." "What I choose," I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. "What choice do I have? I'm here, in your house, dependent on your protection. That's not exactly a position of freedom." "You're more free than you've been in 3 years," he countered. "Free from constantly looking over your shoulder. Free from working your fingers to the bone for minimum wage. Free from living in fear." The accuracy of his assessment stung. "Only because I've traded one captor for another." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "I am not your captor, Elise. I'm offering you a solution. A permanent one." "What kind of solution?" I asked, wary of the shift in his demeanor. Dominic rose and moved to the window, looking out over the desert landscape. "The Vasquez organization believes you know where Michael hid the money he stole. $5 million. He turned back to me. "Do you?" The question I had been asked countless times by countless threats. The question I had always denied knowing the answer to. "No," I said, the familiar lie rolling off my tongue. Dominic's expression didn't change. "I don't believe you." Fear spiked through me. "It's the truth. Michael never told me anything. He just disappeared." left me to deal with the consequences. Dominic returned to his chair, movements languid but with that underlying tension that reminded me of a predator restraining itself. The night before he disappeared, Michael transferred $20,000 into an account in your name, an account you emptied the same day he vanished. His gaze was relentless. You knew he was planning to run. You helped him. My heart hammered against my ribs. How could he possibly know about that account? I had closed it years ago, withdrawn the money in cash. Used it to flee with Jamie when the Vasquez men first came looking. I didn't know what he'd done, I said, clinging to the partial truth. He told me he'd gotten a bonus, that we were going to take a trip. I swallowed hard. The next morning he was gone. No note, no explanation. Then those men came asking about money, about Michael. I took Jamie and ran. Dominic studied me for what felt like an eternity, his expression unreadable. "Let's assume, for the moment, that I believe you," he finally said, though his tone suggested he didn't. "The fact remains that the Vasquez cartel believes otherwise. They will never stop hunting you, Elise, not until they recover their money or extract what they believe is appropriate vengeance." I closed my eyes briefly, the weight of that truth settling on my shoulders like a physical burden. "So what's your solution? Keep us prisoner here forever?" "Not a prison," he said softly. "A sanctuary, protection, for as long as you need it." He leaned forward, those pale eyes capturing mine, "in exchange for your loyalty." "My loyalty," I repeated, the word heavy with implication. "What exactly does that entail?" The smile that curved his lips then was predatory, possessive. "You're an intelligent woman, Elise. I think you understand perfectly what I'm offering." And I did. Protection. Security. A life of luxury for myself and my son. All in exchange for becoming Dominic Castellanos. What? Mistress? Property? And if I refuse? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. "I would never force you to stay," he said. And I almost believed him. But I wouldn't recommend leaving either. Not with the Vasquez cartel still hunting you. A gilded cage was still a cage, no matter how he dressed it up in talk of choices and sanctuary. "I need time," I said, rising from my chair. "To think. To understand what this means for Jamie and me." Dominic nodded, unexpectedly acquiescent. "Of course. Take all the time you need." He rose as well, once again closing the distance between us with those fluid, predatory movements. "But understand this, Elise. I protect what's mine, and from the moment I saw you through that glass, watching you work in my kitchen with those delicate hands and defiant eyes, I decided you would be mine, and the possessive declaration should have terrified me. Instead, it sent a confusing warmth through my body, a treacherous flutter beneath my ribs. I took a step back, needing distance from his overwhelming presence. "I'm not yours," I said, finding a shred of defiance. "I don't belong to anyone." His smile deepened, as though my resistance pleased him. "Not yet," he agreed. "But you will be. We both know it's only a matter of time." The certainty in his voice, the absolute confidence, left me speechless. I turned and fled, not caring how it looked or what it revealed about my state of mind. I needed air, space, distance from the man who seemed able to see through every defense I'd built. As I hurried down the corridor, his words echoed in my mind. Only a matter of time. The most frightening part wasn't his arrogance or his power. It was that, deep down, I feared he might be right. The days at Las Sombras blended into a strange, dreamlike routine. Jamie thrived in the spacious environment, delighting in the pool, the extensive library, and the attention lavished on him by Maria and the other staff. He asked about returning to school only once, easily satisfied by my vague explanation about an extended vacation. I, however, lived in a constant state of tension, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Dominic was often absent during the day, attending to his various businesses in the city. But evenings belonged to him, dinners where he engaged Jamie in conversations about dinosaurs and superheroes, followed by quiet moments on the terrace after Jamie went to bed, where Dominic and I circled each other with words that meant everything and nothing. He never pushed, never rushed, never attempted to force the issue of my loyalty. Instead, He simply existed in my orbit. A gravitational force gradually pulling me closer despite my resistance. A week passed. Then 2. The opulent surroundings began to feel less foreign, the staff less intimidating. I found myself helping in the kitchen sometimes, unable to remain idle while others worked. Maria initially protested, but eventually accepted my need for normalcy, for purpose. It was during one of these kitchen sessions, kneading bread dough alongside Maria, that Dominic found me. "I need to speak with you," he said, his tone serious in a way that sent ice down my spine. In my study. I wiped flour from my hands, exchanging a worried glance with Maria, who nodded encouragingly. "Jamie is with Antonio in the garden," she assured me. "Go." Dominic said nothing as I followed him through the house, his posture tense, the silence heavy between us. In his study, he closed the door with deliberate care and turned to face me. "The Vasquez men found your old apartment yesterday," he said without preamble. "They tore it apart looking for clues to your whereabouts." My stomach clenched. "Did anyone get hurt?" "Mrs. Abernathy is fine," he assured me. "They waited until the building was empty, but they left. A message." His jaw tightened. "For you. And for anyone helping you." I sank into the nearest chair, legs suddenly unable to support me. "What kind of message?" "The kind meant to terrify," he said, his voice hard. "They're growing desperate. The cartel leader's patience is wearing thin." I closed my eyes, guilt and fear warring within me. Mrs. Abernathy, my neighbors, the other tenants, all at risk because of me, because of Michael's actions and my subsequent flight. "There's more," Dominic continued, moving to stand before me. "They've identified Jamie's school. They've been watching it, gathering information." My eyes flew open, panic surging like a tidal wave. "Jamie is safe," he interrupted, his hands coming to rest on my shoulders, steadying me. "Here, with us. They don't know where you are, Elise, but they're getting closer. Their search has narrowed to properties in the desert. It won't be long before they connect me to your disappearance." "What happens then?" I whispered, looking up at him. His expression softened, fingers moving to brush a strand of hair from my face. "Then I eliminate the threat, permanently." The casual way he spoke of violence should have horrified me. Instead, I felt a perverse relief. "You would kill for us?" "Without hesitation," he replied, his eyes never leaving mine. "But there's another way. A better way." He knelt before me, bringing us to eye level. "Tell me where the money is, Elise. Give me the leverage I need to negotiate with the Vasquez cartel." The plea caught me off guard. After 3 years of denying, of running, of pretending ignorance, to finally hear someone ask so directly, with no threats or violence, just a simple request. "I can't," I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. "I promised." "Michael?" Dominic's voice hardened. "You're still protecting the man who abandoned you? Who left you to face the consequences of his actions alone?" I shook my head, a tear spilling down my cheek. "Not Michael. Myself. I promised myself I would never let anyone use that money. It's blood money. Tainted." I drew a shaky breath. People died because of it. I couldn't live with myself if I spent a single dollar. Understanding dawned in his eyes. "You know where it is. You've always known." I nodded, the admission like a weight lifting from my chest. "Michael told me the night before he disappeared. He was drunk, bragging about how clever he'd been, how he'd hidden it where no one would think to look." Another tear fell. "The next morning he was gone. I don't know if he was killed or if he just